we need to ensure that workers of all ages are given equal opportunities in order to participate in the workforce and are supported to do so whilst at work. So the question I asked myself for preparing for this presentation, which I am also very glad to say I was given the opportunity to present at the Senedd a month ago as part of a spotlight on older workers set up by Age Cymru, is to look at what is the situation of older workers in Wales today? Where are the pinch points? What are the challenges or issues that they face for those in work, and importantly for those out of work, potentially seeking to get back into employment? So to do that, I have looked at data from a large UK-wide survey called the UK Household Longitudinal Survey, often called the Understanding Society study. And what I will show you are data looking at older adults in work compared to younger adults or adults of other age groups, as well as older adults in Wales compared to older adults in other parts of the UK, to see how well Wales is doing in that kind of international or UK-wide context. So just to sort of give the background of the many tragedies of the COVID pandemic, one of them has been that we saw a reversal of what was otherwise a rather positive trend towards improving employment rates among older workers in Wales. So if we look at these figures, which I hope you can see, for women, we've seen an increase from the sort of start of the 2000s or early 2000s, getting up to, hope this works, yeah, getting up to a kind of a peak there of around about sort of 68% of women aged 50 to state pension age in employment. And for men, that was kind of getting up to around about sort of 78% as well. We can see, though, the impact of the pandemic has been a significant drop, particularly amongst women, and the kind of uptake or the uptick hasn't really been very sharp. So this is quite a significant impact on the labour market position of older women in particular in Wales, and something that we should be kind of aware of, or policymakers should be aware of, because of the impact and the benefit of being in work in terms of finances, as well as sense of social connection and the like. The other thing that I want to make clear is when we talk about an ageing workforce in Wales, that is not evenly distributed across all industries. So another thing that we need to make sure of when we're thinking about how to support older workers in employment and back into employment is that different companies, different industrial sectors will already have different levels of aging within their population. And for me, kind of interestingly, given that Wales still has a relatively large agricultural workforce, that as early as the sort of 2004, around about 50% of workers in agriculture, forestry and fishery were already aged 50 plus. So if we're thinking again about where employers need to think about supporting workers staying in work for longer, if we are to ensure a vibrant workforce, there are a number of industries that are particularly aging particularly fast. So obviously agriculture, forestry and fishery, transport and communication and manufacturing all saw relatively fast increases. So again, looking at where we need to invest additional kind of information in order for employers to support older workers in those industries. So thinking about what the situation is for older workers, and unfortunately the Zoom thing is masking the cross-national comparisons ever so slightly, but I'll talk you through them. So the way that the slides will work is, on this side, we're going to look at the comparison of older workers to those in sort of middle age, early adulthood, and kind of youth employment or younger workers. And here we're going to look at the proportion, the relative position of older workers in Wales compared to England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So that's this column here, if you like. So what we can see here, actually, in terms of job satisfaction, job-related anxiety, and job-related depression, are that there are not great age-related differences in Wales. So in fact, older workers are not any worse off in Wales than they are compared to younger workers in terms of these sort of work-related issues. That said, bear in mind that these data are from 2022, so post-pandemic. It is likely that some workers, some older workers who had jobs that they didn't like, took opportunities to leave work, so part of that great retirement. And therefore, what we're seeing here are workers who have good jobs who elected to stay if they could, and those who didn't have good jobs, we know are often able to leave into retirement. Whether they return, I think, will be another issue. Here, in terms of cross-national comparisons, actually no difference between the countries. So Wales is doing no better or worse than the other countries in the UK. This, I apologize, is a slightly more difficult graph to read. People are more than happy to share the slides with people afterwards. So this is just looking at flexible working options for people in different age groups. So we know that flexible working is really important, particularly to enable older workers to stay in work for longer, particularly if they've got caring responsibilities, both upwards in terms of looking after parents, as well as downwards, particularly in terms of looking after grandchildren, so children could go to work. The upshot really is that older and younger workers tend to be less likely to be offered these flexible working arrangements and less likely to take them up. Whereas actually what we see is middle-aged workers, slightly hidden there again, are more likely to be offered these kind of flexible working arrangements, which is great. It obviously is important for middle-aged workers who might have childcare responsibilities, but we should make sure that workers of all ages have the same provision and are equally offered those sorts of flexible working arrangements, because they're important for allowing people to stay in work as they age. In terms of cross-national comparisons, actually no real difference between the 4 countries in the UK. Some do better than others in some, and some do better than others in others, but no consistent country that does better than all the rest in terms of providing flexible working opportunities for older adults. In terms of how much control people have over their work, which again is important for people to be able to pace their work around kind of health, caring responsibilities, as well as a wide range of literature that demonstrates that having greater control over your work, being able to manage the demands placed upon you, is good for your health. So in and of itself, it's a good thing. Looking at comparisons by age group, actually we see that the sort of younger adults through to older workers are all fairly similar in terms of how much autonomy they have over their job, but it's the younger workers who are particularly struggling here. So they have less control over their, or less autonomy over their work. No real difference in between the countries. Slight advantage here in Scotland, but not really anything statistically significant. Again, autonomy over the pace of work, so how fast you work, whether you control the demands on you in terms of time. No real difference for these 3 age groups, but again, younger workers at risk here of not really feeling they have control over the pace of work. Lots of being asked to do lots of stuff very fast, which we know is very bad for you. Again, no real difference in terms of international comparisons across the UK. In terms of autonomy over work hours, so getting to choose when you work during the day, which again we know is important in terms of being able to manage those demands. You have to go pick people up, dash off, or you want to be able to sort of manage your time. Actually, none of the age groups in Wales are doing particularly well, which I think goes back to the earlier slide about the availability of flexible working policies in Wales for all age groups. And again, across the UK as a whole, not really a very positive picture of flexible work time for older adults. And again, that's something that's come out from studies by organisations like the Centre for Ageing Better, that did a study with TimeWise looking at flexible working arrangements and finding very low provision, even though now companies are being encouraged to think more and more about providing flexible working arrangements for staff. So it's no longer that. So basically, I think the new law that came in is all employers are now entitled to be able to ask for flexible working arrangements, although employers are not obliged to grant them. But at least now there's an awareness that it's not just for, as it used to be thought of, for women around sort of childbearing age, but actually caring responsibilities are now considered to be a reason for being able to ask for more flexible working hours. So another concern is that older workers are not given career opportunities, that they're seen as being past it, they're not interested in career progression because they've kind of made it. So again, looking at the data for the UK as a whole, what we have, actually looking at Wales and the UK, so what we have here in the blue line is the proportion of people that say they would like a better job with the same employer. And in the orange line, the proportion of people that say they expect a better job with the same employer. So actually, again, we see that kind of younger and older workers are sort of less likely to say they want a better job with the same employer, but they're also somewhat less likely to say they expect a job with the same employer. Actually, compared to the other findings which show that middle-aged workers are doing slightly better, the biggest gap here is between those aged 35 to 49, who about 40% say they would like a better job, but only around about, what's that, sort of 12% say they expect to get one. So lots of kind of frustrated career ambitions in that age group compared to the expectations for older workers across the UK as a whole. Again, no real difference, which seems to be sort of the theme for the cross-national comparisons. In terms of expecting work-related training, so again, another concern is that older workers are denied opportunity to develop new skills, which puts them at a disadvantage as our working lives are changing, becoming more technological, new forms of kind of technological ways of working. So again, looking at the proportion of people say they would like work-related training compared to those who expect to get work-related training by age group, actually the younger group, the younger two groups are most likely to want work-related training. Actually, the older age group is less likely to want or less likely to say they want work-related training. And the two ends of the age spectrum are both least likely to say they expect to get age-related training. So here's a big worry. So again, around about sort of 35 percentage points difference in younger workers who say they would like or expect to get work-related training. There was a slightly cautionary remark here about the proportion of older workers that say they don't, or effectively say they don't want to get work-related training. So we did a study back in 2015, or I did a study back in 2015 with Chris Phillipson for the UK government, looking at work-related training for older adults. And what we saw from some of the stuff that's been published by the National Institute of Older Adults and Community Education, which then got rolled into Learning and Work, was that many older adults said that they didn't want training because they didn't expect it. So they kind of use phrases like, well, I'm too old to get it now, or I won't be kind of offered it anyway. So here there's a sort of slight sort of mix up between people saying I don't want it because they don't expect it. So it could be somewhat circular in that regard. In terms of when people do get offered training, whether older workers are more likely to take it up and how much they're sort of more likely to do. So actually here again, in terms of having done training in the last 12 months, the 50 to 66-year-olds are the least likely to have done it, which again reflects that thing about being less likely to feel they expect to get it or want to get it. But when they do it, they're more likely to do more of it. So older workers on average do more training activities when they undertake training. So again, this suggests that it's not the case that they don't really want to do it, because when they're given the choice to do an opportunity, they really sort of dive in and take those opportunities. In terms of starting new businesses, again, something that this particular government seems to be interested in as a way to get us out of the recession. We looked at the proportion of people that said they wanted to start their own business, and again, a proportion that said they expected to start their own business. And you can see quite clearly this is where the real issue is in terms of frustrated entrepreneurial activities. So again, around about 27% of those aged 16 to 19 would like to start their own business, but less than 5% expect to do so. Interestingly, older adults are the lowest at both of these, which is sort of interesting because for a time, older adults were the fastest growing group of self-employed in the UK. So I think that the pandemic has probably done something to that, given the sort of instability of the labour market. So people now in their 50 plus or 50 to 66 are now sort of least likely to want to and least likely to expect to start their own businesses. And Wales actually here, this is where we do see some international differences in the UK, have the lowest rates of over 50s expecting to start their own business, whereas England is considerably higher than all three of the other countries. And lastly then, to think about those outside of work, where we've seen that huge drop, particularly amongst older women. And again, one of the sort of the real concerns in research on kind of older workers is that once older workers get made redundant or leave the labour market, they're much less likely than other age groups to re-enter the labour market. And I remember seeing sort of a statistic from the Netherlands back in the early 2000s. I think after 2 years, if you haven't got back into the labour market, the chance of re-employment is 0. So really tough to sort of get back in once you're out. And this is what we see here. So what is your chance of, so these are people who are out of work in the different age groups. What's your chance of getting back into work in the next 12 months? The younger age groups seem pretty positive, and you can see that kind of positivity goes down with age. And here, I think it's something like about 3% of the 50 to 66 think that it's very likely, and only around about 10%, so 1 in 10, think it's likely that they'll re-enter work within the next 12 months once they're made unemployed. And again, Wales slightly worse than particularly England and Scotland, about the same here as Northern Ireland in that comparison. So just to sort of wind up, so we are an aging workforce in Wales. In fact, we have the most aged workforce in Wales of the 4 countries in the UK. So anything to do with older workers takes on an extra salience in the Welsh context. In particular, the COVID pandemic seems to have exacerbated that. We have seen that evidence of that great retirement of people being pushed out of work or opting to leave work due to COVID. That said, Wales in general doesn't do any better or worse than the other countries of the UK, so that's kind of some solace. And in general, older workers don't seem to be too disadvantaged in the workplace compared to workers of other age groups. In fact, younger workers seem to be kind of facing particular challenges at the moment in terms of being offered various support. But where the real problem does seem to lie is those older workers who are out of work, who we want to get back into work for them, for the economy, who feel there's very little opportunity for them to do so. So we really need to, I think, work harder, and particularly to develop those policies to support older workers to get back into work, and to challenge ideas or stereotypical ideas around older workers that prevent employers sometimes from looking at them as a viable workforce option.